Thanks for tuning in to the Starbased Podcast. This is your host, Tratium, along with Ouija. In this podcast, we'll just be talking candidly about anything crypto, DeFi, Web3, and more. Enjoy.
So long time no speak. Since we spoke last time, before we decided to record something, it was during the UST meltdown. I seem to remember, or close to.
I think it was like right before, it was like that first like hint of a DPEG when it dropped down to like 96 cents or something. And we're like,
Yeah,
this is interesting. And then like
yeah,
on, what
yeah,
was it, Monday or Tuesday the following week,
yeah.
the death spiral just happened.
I mean, I mean, if the DPEG drops to 95 and below, like that's a serious problem. It doesn't look like much, but if people are paying attention, that's a big warning sign, big red flag. And yeah, we were kind of like teetering on the edge, and then it was a question of who's at the door first, and then just chaos.
It really was. And I popped over to like, Twitter, Reddit, like Telegram groups and stuff. And there were still people, especially like on like the Luna subreddit and everything that were just like, oh yeah, like I
Yeah,
bought back in more. It's going to snap back to peg. But once it got under like 95 cents, I was like everywhere I could find, I was like, hey, like it's like there's no coming back from this. Like
yeah,
your bet
yeah,
right now is that it's going to be saved by like the Bitcoin reserves or Jump or some other VC is going to dump billions of dollars in to save the peg, and that is your bet
yeah,
right now. You're betting that they're going to do that, because if they don't, it's not going to save itself. Like the downward spiral reflexivity is like it's already started. Like unless some individual entity comes in to save it, your money's gone. It's everything is going to zero. And they're like, no, no, no,
yeah,
it's not what's going to happen. Like this is how it's supposed to work. Like there's a lot of misunderstanding of Luna. A
yeah.
lot of people with their pants down.
Yeah, it's a fully algorithmic stablecoin, or was a fully algorithmic stablecoin. So really, technically, it's not backed by anything. I mean, even something like Frax, and Frax, I like Frax as a
Me too.
project, but that is has its collateralization ratio, its CR, and it is backed somewhat by USDC. I mean, obviously. Actually, that's an interesting point I'll mention. There's a bit of a misunderstanding there between the people think it's backed by the USDC, as in it's like payable out. It's not really how it works. So, for instance, people were saying to me today, actually, it was brought up. They're saying, "Oh, what happens if it was a bank run, etc., etc., or what happens if someone blacklists the USDC blacklist Frax?" And it's a question of you can't really blacklist that. That's not how it works, because Fractious deploys USDC straight through the MMs to Curve, etc. So really, you'd have to blacklist all the Curve addresses and so forth and contracts, and it's not really how that would work. So people kind of try to paint all these algos partially state like backed DAI Frax. They try and paint a lot of them with the same brush. They're completely different. And yeah, I mean, the shame with Luna was the fact that it wasn't backed. It felt like he kind of, and I don't want to put this all on Do Kwon, but they were very public about backing that with BTC, and it opens you up to an exploit, which is what we saw. Which is, I'm not sure if I mentioned it to you before, but it's called a George Soros attack.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that
what
in our
happened.
last call. Yeah, go ahead and explain that.
Yeah, so that's an old, really old attack, and that was actually the same thing. Same thing as what they did is essentially what happened with Luna, for example, is they bought loads, or they borrowed a load of BTC. They sold it into Luna for UST, and then basically dropped the UST rapidly. And that's what they did. That's what George Soros did to the British pound.
Mm-hmm.
So it's exactly the same attack, and it was quite coordinated, but it's fair game.
Yeah.
Which is the sad thing, is to say that with so many losing so much, but it was there, and someone had the stones to exploit it in such a big way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I immediately during and after the attack, well, people called it an attack. And yes, it was. And again, yes, it's horrible that a lot of people lost billions of dollars worth of their retirement savings and just fund money, whatever it may be. Like
Oh
there's
yeah,
it's devastating. But like it was vulnerable. Like this was always going to happen. Like it wasn't a matter of if, it was when. So it would
yeah,
have been much better if it happened last March during that first depegging during that March, sorry, last May, the May crash. It would
yeah.
have been better if it happened then because like the TVL was I think maybe like 10 billion instead of 40. Um, so
S-
but it's better that it happened like last month than in a year from now or 2 years from now because again, it was inevitable.
that would have been like that would have been really something to see if it
Especially
had
if
happened.
Joe executed on his vision of like entangling Luna and UST into all of DeFi, because that was his plan. Like he said it out loud, multiple times over the winter of like, I want to tangle Luna into everything so that if it goes down, I bring all of DeFi, all of crypto with me. Like he said it, like, and
It's a
that's what he wanted to
crazy,
do. And he was
yeah,
days away from it with 4pool at least. Like I'm not sure how big of an impact that would have had, but it would have made it a little bit harder to depeg, but when it depegged, it would have caused more cascades kind of to happen across kind of conjoined assets and stuff. So it's a good thing it happened when it did. Uh, it's just unfortunate that like it even got to the size it was. Like it's really a
yeah,
pretty valuable L1 with just a complete Ponzi tacked onto it unnecessarily. And that's like, that was their growth hack, right? The USD was a growth hack and it failed
yeah.
and now that everyone's suffering the consequences.
Yeah, it was pretty nasty, and you had Anchor being so popular mainstream, to the fact that funds were buying into it, people had their pensions into it, people are using it for real yield, and the it blew up, um, and yeah, that's a really sad thing to see, to be
Yeah,
honest.
it's really
But
like go ahead.
I was going to say it does really show you the importance of understanding what you're looking at. I mean, I at the time just before that, I'd say maybe a month ago, I was working part of. I'm normally obviously anon, but I was working a part of a DAO, which I think you previously know about. But
Mhm.
I was helping them with the treasury, and they were looking for you know delta strategies. They were looking at stable yields, trying to avoid things. They actually did quite well in the fact that they cashed out just before the whole drop. Uh, but they were asking me about UST, and I was saying not with a stick. Don't touch it. It's a ticking time bomb. And I think there was a really good, actually, someone wrote a really good article on that and posted it through CT. Got destroyed for it, unfortunately, but it was a fantastic article. And he or she was saying something to the effect of watch this, it's coming down and it's coming down soon. It's just a matter of when. Um, but yeah, it does highlight the fact that you need to understand these things. Fey, Die, these are really good projects. Maybe not as glamorous or as outspoken as UST, but they've got a really decent foundation by now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting
Yeah,
to me how Anchor was maybe marketed just how it spread as being like one of the safest places to earn stable yields and like it it just even normies that I know like that's the one gap they even knew about like they could be completely
yeah.
unexposed to crypto as a whole but they knew about Anchor. Um it's just crazy how much stuff got wrapped into it and how it came just like a lot of the other scams though, right? Like it's just like Hex and Pulse Chain, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Like those always end up being like the most popular projects that newbies latch onto. And it's just crazy
yeah,
because Luna UST was one that kind of captured the imagination of both like normies and a lot of crypto degens and
yeah.
and VCs and like a lot of people who should have been a lot smarter and really was a vocal minority of maybe like a handful of people on C2 who were just like saying, "Hey, it's gonna collapse for like the better part of a year."
I
So
mean,
yeah, it's just sad.
absolutely. Absolutely, and it's important to mention that these people who are preaching it, a lot of them have their finger at the pulse. A lot of retail, myself included. I would say a lot of them don't have their finger on the pulse. If something drops by like we're saying, to a 9.5, you can bet your bottom dollar that people are pulling out, and they're pulling out fast.
Yeah.
Uh, and the retail, they don't have the alarm set up. They're not watching the charts. They don't know what's happening, and they will not be first to the door.
No,
They won't
never.
be, and they'll get caught. Caught with the pants down, and it's really sad to see. And it happens not just with this, like you're saying. It's the stuff that captures the imagination, like Time Wonderland and things like that. And
Yes.
you have these different scenario, but you have the same sort of thing. Very charismatic, very interesting, grabs the imagination, but may not be very sustainable. May have things that need to be more transparent, for such a transparently kind of orientated, or you'd think that it was more orientated transparently with crypto. You'd be surprised how much is not being transparent.
Yeah.
Being on chain is not the same. Um, and I think there's benefits to both things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sad to see.
Well,
Um,
go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say, I was going to segue just. I've not looked at all the new kind of toke accreditation, so I was wondering if you could just tell me a little bit more about that, because I haven't had the chance to look at it, and things have moved so quick, and I know that you've read up on it, so I'd be interested just to kind of maybe, or tell me a little bit about it, and also maybe how it would be a good thing for me to look at, to buy, because obviously I hold toke. As painful as that has been, holding anything,
Yeah, it's been
but
rough.
it's been a rough ride, but
Yeah.
we are not yet finished with the ride. So
No,
so
I
yeah,
mean,
but I'd be interested to hear about that.
yeah. So, yeah, the latest tokenomic updates were kind of so before, like maybe in the past like 6 months, the team has hinted at something called permanent assets or P assets, and
Hmm.
the kind of idea was that it would be a way for inbound deposits or inbound. I don't know. I kind of like to refer to it as like it's similar to bonding, kind of how Olympus, like you exchange your non-native token, so like you can use UST, Frax, whatever it is, not UST anymore, USDC, anything like that. You
Yeah,
deposit that into
yeah,
tokamak, and you receive back uh, a in exchange an asset, tokamak's native asset. So
yeah,
the spin on that now is ACC, which comes from accretion, accumulation. Like in a black hole, you have the
yeah,
accretion disk, which is like what swoops around the black hole with all the matter that's being pulled in
yeah,
and permanently into the center of the black hole. So with ACC, external people come in and they say, okay, I want to deposit, let's say, $1,000 worth of Frax, and I will receive $1,001 worth of ACC. So as the depositor, you get to offload the asset that you want to kind of uh, exit or deposit into tokamak. In return, you get a discount on ACC, and ACC also kind of accrues value via revenue sharing and uh, other kind of value flows. So it's beneficial for users if they want to take advantage of like ACC, because you could have a user who has an asset that they maybe want to sell and to something on the open market. They can just deposit into tokamak and receive back a revenue generating asset in return, ACC. But I think it's far more powerful for DAOs, because this is a way for DAOs to offload their native assets, again, let's say like Frax, or in this case FXS. They could deposit something like that into tokamak. So and they it's a win-win for them, right? They get to deposit assets to increase the amount of Frax or FXS or whatever it may be in tokamak. In return, they get back ACC. So they get a revenue generating asset that is mostly backed by like a basket of whatever else is being owned by the
yeah,
protocol within tokamak. And then tokamak benefits because they get these deposits permanently, which add to the protocol owned value. And there is multiple terms being thrown around now. So like yeah, you've always had like TVL, which is total value locked, which is just
yes,
total amount of assets within a protocol. And then PCV, which is protocol controlled value, which is in the original kind of tokamak language would be the value of assets that tokamak itself owns,
Hmm.
But PCV is also kind of an overloaded term, 'cause it also refers it within in other protocols. Maybe it could also refer to assets that the protocol controls but not necessarily owns outright. And
Yeah.
so within the last community call, Carson and a few of the other team have really taken on to the term of POA, protocol owned asset, as a clear definition of TVL
Yes.
that the protocol itself, the treasury of the protocol owns. And so when you buy or bond into ACC, you deposit into the protocol owned asset uh, kind of pool and receive back ACC. And the
I
protocol can
understand.
use that to generate revenue and deploy it. And
Yeah.
this is a mechanic that I think is really interesting, because my biggest kind of long-term concerns with tokamaks success has been, can we generate enough POA through LP fees alone to reach the singularity, right? Like LP fees, especially with, like,
Yeah.
Uniswap v3 and concentrated liquidity and just AMMs in general, like whether that's profitable, like is has been really kind of a um, fuzzy. Like there's a lot of conflicting, there's a lot of reports, research reports, and just anecdotal kind of evidence of people who are like, yeah, I've been LP for a year and I'm down, right? Like not even just because of impermanent loss, um, or just assets changing prices. It's just like the fees are not enough to to fight off the IL, um, and that has made me hesitant to believe that the singularity could be reached through LP fees and being an AMM market maker by itself. But ACC is a much more powerful way to generate revenue. And all
Yeah.
inbound deposits are referred to as revenue. So it's a really interesting concept to me, and I think that could like really fast track the singularity.
I think that's a really good distinction to make. Actually, and I think that's something that people sometimes miss is they look at a project or a treasury and they see all these tokens and they go right. They do their math and they go, this protocol is worth X amount.
Yeah,
Something that a lot of people don't see or don't take into account is those native assets. Those native assets are worthless. You don't include them in your evaluation, um, and a lot of people do. Traditional finance, you would basically X that out. It's not
yeah,
worth it. You might include everything that company owns physically, so printers, chairs, tables, because you can liquidate those. Um, but in an online decentralized nature, you're not. There's no
yeah. No one's got office
desks
chairs.
to liquidate.
You don't have office chairs
But
in the
there are,
metaverse.
yeah, yeah, maybe on
You don't have
maybe
legs.
in what do they call it? Was it Meta? I keep on getting messed up because of the
Meta.
Facebook thing. But
Yeah. Oh
yeah,
god.
maybe you can liquidate something in Meta, but for 50% fee, probably. Anyway, but yeah, it's a really important distinction to make, I think. And yeah, I think that even if an AMM function was enough to get to the singularity, why would you not want to get there quicker? Why would you not want to have more
Yeah.
strings to your bow? You want to have multiple revenue generating mechanisms in your protocol that can synergize not only with each other but also with other protocols and other DAOs. Because you're adding value to the entire ecosystem, you're making yourself an asset that really can be used, and that's they tend to be the ones that stick around, um,
Yeah.
both accruing value and are useful, have real utility. And yeah, you're absolutely right with the MMMs. I've seen the same papers saying that it's not enough. Um, Personally, there are only a few things that I would really look at doing that with, but mostly stables. Um,
Yeah.
not I would say for the I think most people who listen to this will be crypto natives, but I'd say a la Degen Spartan, stable up and
Yeah.
use them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a bad strategy, and if you're nimble enough, you can move um, the best yield, and be that mercenary capital, be that um, they call them liquidity locus, but you
Locuses.
can
Yeah.
do it. Yeah, yeah, I've used all sorts of phrases to describe them, but you can do it. It's just picking and
Yeah.
choosing the winners as well as the hard part.
Yeah. And I think the idea that like, oh, you can like why didn't we think of this? A protocol that just accepts deposits of assets and returns something in return, like as you know, ACC is. It's like why doesn't every protocol just have some sort of bonding interface or something where you can where they accept other assets and return back their own native asset? Like, why doesn't everybody do that if it's such an
Yeah,
obvious way of generating revenue? And like the answer to that is like, well, because they're not providing a service that anyone cares about, right? Like some random, fork of
yeah,
some protocol, like another like Olympus type fork or anything where it says, hey, like deposit your native asset into our protocol and we'll give you back some monopoly money in return. Like there's no value proposition there for a user or for a DAO, right? But Tokamac's kind of value proposition there is the service of being an automated market maker, being a decentralized market maker that can take those deposits that they get and pair them up with like the stable pair reactor assets, and then make markets and actually provide liquidity as a third party.
yeah,
And I think that's a big missing piece that some people don't get, is that for like a say I create tratium token, right? Great, and I want to be my own market maker. Like, why don't I just be an LP for myself? It's like, well, okay,
yeah,
if I have $10 million of tratium token, well, I can't just single side deposit that into nothing. Like a market needs to
yeah,
have both sides of it, right? Like, so if I want to make a market with $10 million, I need $10 million worth, or I guess $5 million worth of a stable coin, of something that actually like is backed by, in a way fiat or some other, or like Ethereum, that it has, more intrinsic value. Like you have to have that pair asset. And for a brand new DAO, a brand new token that launches, you don't have that unless you perform like an ICO where you're getting a bunch of
yeah,
ETH in return, and then you're putting up like your treasury funds to LP. Whereas with Tokamak, like Tokamak is the one that already has that treasury of pair assets. So yeah, that's kind of the value add there for why would a protocol want to
yeah,
take advantage of ACC? um, and simply because the value proposition of the service that Tokamak offers as a decentralized market maker is huge. And as we've seen with like all those spotlight
yeah,
AMAs and everything, like DAOs are clamoring to get a reactor, and really it's only
yeah,
limited by the team's bandwidth to onboard new teams to reactors, and like safely deploy that much liquidity and stuff. I mean, it's a slow but steady race.
yeah.
Like within the bear market, there's no reason to rush through and go to like straight to permissionless reactors or anything like that. So
No,
yeah, it's a service that people are asking for.
it is a great utility specifically aimed at bootstrapping protocols and reducing costs, basically
Yeah,
a cost that a protocol would otherwise have to pay a premium for. So it does have a really good value proposition already. The question is just how do they further that value, and what other additional utilities can be brought. And yeah, so I clearly need to go and read more about the ACC token there, but I do definitely like the idea of that. I think that's a pretty smart idea to look at using. Um, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good thing to look at. What
yeah, for
else is on the
sure.
agenda? The goblins. We'll just swiftly move on to NFTs briefly for a break. I'm not sure if
Yeah,
you're
let's
up
do
to
that.
NFTs.
I
Do you keep
have
up to
been
date?
I don't like participate in the NFT market. Like my NFT,
Yeah,
so like I guess God, it was a year ago now. Oh yeah, almost like over a year ago when the Mooncats were first rediscovered. I was like interacting directly with the
cats.
Etherscan contract, and
Yeah,
minted like a handful of them, and that ended up being a pretty big win. I mean,
yeah,
they've basically been like the stable coin of like the NFT world, just basically flat at like 0.4, 0.5 ETH for like over a year now. Um, and then I also found Forgotten Runes, which
yeah,
I love that art style. I mean, just like 8-bit stuff, it looks great.
yeah,
But like they just seem like a really honest team, and I like their building, and they had a really cool trailer for an animated TV show that's maybe gonna be on like Netflix or something. So I appreciate like how heads down they are and how they're actually building, like they're executing on the roadmap, which is like, meme in NFT world, like to actually have a roadmap. Like the Forgotten Runes team is actually doing that. And I picked up
yeah,
a bunch of those before they got really hyped. And that has also
yeah.
been pretty big success. But other than that, my NFT plays are like I got like Xmon tokens,
Oh
because
yeah,
like if you like keep your ear to the ground on CT, it sounds like that's going to be converted into like a pseudo token when SudoSwap launches, which is a
Mm.
NFT AMM. So I'm more doing like the sell the shovels to the gold digger type plays because the NFT
Hmm.
market
Hmm.
moves way too quickly. But
Yeah.
that goblin spaces with this the like it sounded like they were just like gargling water in their back of their mouths for
Some
like 2 hours.
serious
I
value
was
in that.
cracking up. That was hilarious. So and a bunch of people seem salty about the goblins, like a lot of CT, like maybe
Because they
because
didn't buy them.
they didn't buy him or because it wasn't like a
Yeah.
project they created. Like they were salty about the goblins and like hating on the success. But I'm like, more power to him, man. Like this is great growth hacking just to have these little spaces and stuff. I thought it was excellent.
It's like the perfect NFT, the perfect kind of joke almost at the perfect time.
It
It's like
really was, yeah.
Goblin Town. We're all in Goblin Town at the moment,
Yeah.
and I think it was just perfect to do it. There's a sense of humor to it as well. Um, and then obviously the stream of WTFs afterwards was hilarious.
Yeah.
But there's another thing that I noticed just before that was Kevin Rose. If you know Kevin Rose, he basically
Yeah.
was one of the Moonbird guys. He's really interesting. He knows Tim Ferriss and the rest of those guys, and he's big into that. He's a very quick mover, but he had the Moonbirds, and that was very interesting to do. My NFT plays are horrific,
Yeah.
and I'm generally a loser. I get in, get out, and never make any profit. Or
Any successes?
the mu- no, no. I cannot say. I cannot say. I mean, I did make a very small success of Gary V's NFT, but to be honest, I didn't hold long enough to make any real profit from it. Considerable profit, which I probably could have done. But
And it
easy come, easy go with
yeah, but
NFTs.
it's sad though because like I know like I am like okay, so like 2 years ago, like right after the tail end of like DeFi summer, and NFT started like picking up and stuff. Like I was
Mm,
like, NFTs are stupid. Like I was like
yeah.
one of the many that was just like, this is like ridiculous. Who's gonna pay this much for like a JPEG or whatever? And then maybe it took like a couple of those. What's the Punk 56529?
Oh
His
yeah.
like he has there's a long threads about NFTs and crypto in general and stuff. And I got like punk pilled on that, and I was like, you know what? Like
Ah,
it is like I I see it now. Like I see like the appeal of like the digital Rolex, the digital like brand, and
yeah.
the and then I realized that like for people like me and perhaps like you that really like kind of grew up on the internet, like the idea that things on the internet are as real life is kind of like obvious. Like I don't care to have an actual Rolex or an expensive watch, but if I could like flash like an NFT on my Apple Watch, you know, like I have now, you know, changing my watch faces and stuff to
Yeah.
have the NFTs I own, like that to me is far more appealing than like an actual luxury good in real life. And
Yeah.
yeah, and on top of that, I've also kind of like an epiphany type thing the other day, and I was like watching like the trailer for like the new Obi-Wan show that's coming out. I'm like what is Star
Right.
Wars, right? Like it started off as some idea in some dude's head, like you know, and then it became a script and then a movie and then merchandise, right? Like the merchandise is like where most of like the money for like Disney stuff comes from. Like at the end of the
Mhm.
day, it's mostly just intellectual property, right? It's monetized intellectual property, but it started with like
Yeah.
the idea of like a lightsaber or a Yoda type like plushie or something like that. Like it's all just, you know, a brand or an idea that people like latch onto and they want to like have that become part of their personality or part of their kind of like the culture that they have like Star Wars posters and stuff. So like
Yeah.
why can't you have that why can't you have that with NFTs? Like why can't Bored Apes or Forgotten Runes or something like that become the next like major brand that starts off as just some IP that starts in someone's head, goes to a script, goes to a movie, like the other side, you know, movie that's coming out or whatever that's going to be, and a video
Mm.
game and then some memorabilia. Like that's all that like a lot of the most valuable brands are. Like they're just ideas and just intellectual property. And so the idea of like NFTs kind of taking over that kind of space and like becoming digital first, like internet native brands owned by the people, like that makes perfect sense to me now. Like I don't see why anyone could like see NFTs and think like that's impossible because I think that's clearly what's going to be happening.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people pay for an asset now that they believe is going to be worth more in the future as well. So they're looking like any of these tokens or NFTs. They're looking for them to become more valuable. But like you say, people also pay for authenticity. In fact, it's a
Yes.
really unique human trait that, and also something authentic. We pay above and beyond for. We're willing to trade, not just money, but we are willing to trade anything for something that is authentic. And it's some sort of kind of innately acquired obsession of people. But
Yeah.
it's also sometimes wanting to belong to a community, that sense of groupishness, which is a really
Yes.
human
Tribalism.
trait, tribalism exploited everywhere in life, especially almost on steroids within the crypto sphere, a la Terra, um, or Link, or any of
Yeah.
the other ones you want to think
Let's
about.
I'm
But
gonna cut that part out.
yeah, I was going to say any other shots I want to fire
Marines.
off. Just have them storm in. Hopefully I don't get stoned for that, but I might do. But yeah, like people want to belong. They want to be a part of something. They want to enjoy something and share it with the community. Obviously, no one wants to enjoy something on their own because it doesn't really mean much. So they need
No,
to share it with people.
drive past some like roadside bar, right, with a bunch of bikers outside. They're all driving their
Yeah,
Harleys. They're all with the same leather jackets with the patch on the back. How is
yeah.
that not just like a more like grisly
Tubby
version of
cats.
like, right, yeah, right? How's that more like more like a
Yeah,
darker version of just like wearing your Bored Ape Yacht Club hoodie? It's
yeah,
not. People want
yeah,
to be part of a group and like have a shared fan base kind of fanboyism or something like that. Like
yeah.
it's part of
Absolutely.
human culture. They want to belong. They want to make friends. They want to. It's all about social, right? Like they want to
Yeah,
chat with people. They want to like hang out with friends and stuff that have similar interests.
yeah.
And boomers don't really understand how that works on the internet, right? Because boomers go on
I
the
don't.
internet and they like use Excel. They squint and look
Yeah,
at like Facebook and stuff. Like they're
yeah.
not deep into the web on like these discords and Twitter and stuff where they like
No.
like most of my social interaction is online. Like you're
Most
the
of my
first,
social on
yeah, other, yeah,
Telegram.
yeah, other than like my wife, this is the longest that we've been chatting for half an hour here. This is the longest I've talked
Yeah.
to another person since the last time I like flew down to like Austin or whatever for like an event.
Mm,
Like this is,
mm.
yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, online life is as real life, and
It is
we
real
have the
life.
brands and the IP and stuff in the metaverse,
Yeah.
whatever that metaverse might actually be defined as, and it's not 3D Second Life type thing where you walk around. Metaverse is just like the culmination of your online existence, whether that's on Discord
Yeah.
and Twitter and video games, with NFTs. It's just your digital life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, say, people say it's not real life, but digital life is real life. It's value, it's social interaction, connection. It's all the things that people strive for in real life. It's exactly the same. It is life. It's just through a different lens. It's through a different medium.
Yeah.
It's digitalized. That's all it is. It's just translated. I think what boomers may do in the future is they may resonate more with the classic artist, the digital artists like people. I think they understand people. I think they'll understand it through someone like Gary Vee with the Fly Fish Club,
Hmm.
the exclusive membership that is bought via an NFT contract, and they can access that restaurant. Um, I think they will understand that because it's an easy translation from what they already know. The Tubby Cats, the CryptoPunks, the Bored Apes, the insert above, the Rune Warriors. They're a little bit more out there.
Yeah.
They're a bit more hard to understand. The community, you know, dare I say, Miladies, that community. What the hell, the goblins? Like you can't understand those
No,
unless you're
you
kind of
really
like
can't.
natively involved in it. Because you're like,
Yeah.
how do you describe that kind of debauchery to someone?
Yeah,
You
it's
can't.
incredibly difficult. And I think like even on CT you see a lot of like the spread of like the way like inverse bra like types, like the Wazi
Yeah,
language and stuff, like you
yeah,
see more and more people typing in this completely strange language of
yeah,
is, can, has, it's and I think part of that is just for the meme, but part of it is to like keep the tradfi folk out. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like speaking like some secret language with your sibling when you're a kid so that your parents don't know what the hell you're talking about. It's the same kind of thing happening on CT where they're kind of speaking this like secret language so that like the
Yeah.
tradfi folk like don't know what the hell they're talking about. And so you'll always have that kind of more like the I mean it's all a spectrum, right? You have like the complete like CFI type projects that very much want to play ball with like regulatory agencies and everything and be very close to what's going on in traditional finance. And then you have like CDFI and stuff. And kind of where you see Tokamak too, I think you have a team that has very strong DeFi backgrounds, but also very strong TradFi backgrounds, and
Mm.
VC relations and stuff like where they will be able to kind of onboard kind of TradFi and legacy capital and users and stuff, while still being very like degen and DeFi native. And then you have the stuff on the complete other end of the spectrum, perhaps like Yearn, which is run in a way where like half their marketing has like waifus and hentai and stuff like that, mostly as like a keep out type poster on the front of the door, so that
Yeah.
it excludes people who aren't like properly in the weeds on this stuff and properly like degen and stuff. So it's all a spectrum, and I think
Yeah.
people who try to claim that one or the other will be successful are wrong. Like it's everything can be successful. It all depends on what part of the spectrum you want to land on, and it's the internet. All this stuff can coexist, and users can choose which ones
It's
they want to use.
it's absolutely that. I think everything has its niche. Everything has a need, um, and there I think with each one providing some sort of value, that there is a place for most projects. There's a place for most of them, I think. We can see that with the stable coins. You have your over collateralized, you have your under collateralized, you have your algorithmics. You have all these different setups, and each one, it's not like one will be the king. It's
Right.
kind of a reductionist way to think, and also a very silly way to think. It's oftentimes you'll end up being a loser if that's the way you think, if you don't pick right. But if you use each one as they're intended, or the use cases that uh, are presented to you to use them, I think you stand to gain a lot. I think, again, I keep going back to Frax just because I know it a little bit better. But then you've got the decentralized rate. You have these DeFi protocols that can survive without leadership, in a sense. Frax isn't quite there yet, but they do have a strong decentralized background, and it's the same thing with Ethereum. If you look at the network, you can't put a gun to Vitalik's head and tell him to shut it down, because it doesn't
No,
work.
no.
Even you've got he's a figurehead in a sense, but he's not the head honcho. He used to be more of the dev, but now he's more of like writes essays, very interesting ones, and kind of helps guide the community in a sense.
Yeah.
So you have these projects are really good, I think, and they all have their niches.
Yeah, I think during
Yeah.
this morning, Ropstein, I don't they're
The
pronouncing
test network, I've got
yeah,
eyes on that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, they that merge, not merge, the merge to
the
the beacon
merge.
change happened on Ropstein this
Yeah,
morning,
yep.
which was fun to
Yes, it did.
watch because, like you said, like Vitalik was very much like in the background. Like they had like this big Zoom conference call, the dev all core devs, and it zooms out to show like all the people on the Zoom call, and there's like 100 people on it, and Vitalik is just one of
Yeah,
the faces in there, and he talked a couple times, but mostly it was like Danny and a few other people. It's like, yeah,
yeah,
this is really cool to see. Like this is what a decentralized organization and community is. It's like
yeah,
Vitalik, who is really the only name anyone else would recognize on that call, but he was not the one pushing it forward. He was not the one
no,
actually making sure that things went well. Um, and yeah, it's taken years to get to this point. But
yeah.
that's how long it takes when you don't have a central leader or a central
You
entity
don't have a
pushing things
central leader,
forward.
and they do things properly. They don't rush things. Like, people
Yeah,
always want things now, and it doesn't work like that. And I
no,
think when you do rush things, it goes wrong, especially when there's people waiting for you to
yeah,
mess up, and they'll take advantage of it. I think people sleep on ETH. They sleep on the merge. They think it's too big. Some people think it's too small. Some people, etc., etc. You get the maxis, but people are really sleeping on the merge thing. Like they're sleeping on it hard. And if you spend a minute in Ethereum's Discord, and you don't have to like bug them or whatever, but the work is being done there. If you go there and you listen, you watch, and you read, um, you start to get an idea of just how close the merge is, and you could have figured out how close the merge was coming before these test runs weeks ago.
Yeah.
If you were in there, they were close. You know which bugs, the little kind of bugs that they were sorting, some of their teething problems. The fact that like last week or the week before, like there wasn't really any bugs. It was just it was almost a failure, point of failure on the other end.
Right.
So it's just sorting little things out like that. They're really close. Be that bullish or not.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a bit of a harder question to
Yeah,
answer.
and then you have the other side of the spectrum, which is something completely centralized, or maybe that's little bit harsh, but like my example would be like Solana, which is a lot of people argue that it's quite centralized,
I
and
would say so.
yeah, and yet it's down like a lot. Like it was down 2 days ago,
It's a
three
bit of a
days ago.
joke.
It was
It's a
down a couple
bit
of
of a
yeah.
meme.
It
Yeah.
is. And it's like, okay, well, you have Ethereum, which is very decentralized, and yes, it took has taken years to get to the merge.
Yeah.
Admittedly, there's been a lot of architectural type changes that they basically scrapped the first kind of POS implementation and stuff. But then you have like
Yes.
Solana, which is very centralized and constantly down. It's like
Yeah.
it's hard to like, and I still think that there is a place for Solana, but
I
I
think
don't,
so.
it's never going to be accepted as a kind of Ethereum like uh you know decentralized base layer, because even with Ethereum, like, which is very obviously, to I think most people who don't have like a bone to pick, it's decentralized enough, definitely. Like it's quite
Yeah.
decentralized. The nodes, the kind of ownership structure, everything about it is very decentralized, second only probably to Bitcoin. And you still have like Bitcoin maxis who cry all the time about like, oh, pre-mine, oh, it's all controlled by Vitalik, et cetera, et cetera. And they
Yeah.
very much do not accept that Ethereum is in any way centralized, and they will complain about it
Sure.
all the time. And like how, and maybe this is a very vocal minority, but how will they see something like Solana or literally any other blockchain as a possible, decentralized base layer? If Ethereum is not good enough for them, what possibly is? And like, again, maybe it's like a vocal minority, maybe their opinion doesn't matter too much because the Bitcoin maxi community is, you know, they're not really the ones to follow the charge in the move to Web3 and everything. But yeah,
No.
I think yeah,
No.
Bitcoin, Ethereum's doing quite a good job.
Yeah. I mean, if you ask a Bitcoin maximalist, if you ask a Bitcoin maximalist, where's DeFi or what is DeFi, they'll just say they haven't built it yet. You
Yeah,
know,
right. It doesn't
we
exist because we
can
haven't built it yet.
yeah, we can keep on popping off shots as long as we like, but
Yeah,
but yeah, it's a point. I mean, I would say that the people who make those points, maybe they lack some foresight and understanding. Otherwise, they
yeah,
wouldn't come out with things like that. Um, personally, that's what I feel like, and it's just people feel the need to take standpoints in certain camps.
they do. Yeah,
I
it's that tribalism again.
It's the
They just
tribalism, and it
feel
blocks. Yeah, it's that people are blind to a lot of things.
it is. Yeah,
If they were asking, saying Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that, and then I were to bring up a question, go, oh, okay, in X amount of years, when the cost of network security goes up for Bitcoin, and that most people can't afford it, what happens then? Um, who's going to uphold the network?
and they just
Uh,
hand wave it away. Oh, it's not
they
gonna be a problem
hand
until
wave that
24,
away.
2140. It's like, no, no, no. It's gonna be a problem way before that. I actually just
Yeah, it's
got
going
an
to be.
image on my phone
Yeah,
about like the block rewards and how they will taper off, and it is alarming to look at. Like it goes from, I mean, the reward just it drops off a cliff, and that's
yeah,
okay if the price keeps going up exponentially. And admittedly, I would love for that to happen, right? If Bitcoin price keeps
oh,
going up
brilliant.
exponentially, that'll spill over to Ethereum and spill into all the alts, and everyone's gonna have a
Sure.
great time. It's gonna be a party. But
Yeah.
if it does not completely grow exponentially in value, then at a certain point in the next not that many years, I mean, decade, even as early as a decade or two, the reward for miners will not pay their hardware costs, and that is
No.
concerning. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest problems with like seeing Satoshi as like a godlike figure, that he like somehow solved every economic problem on the first
Yeah.
go of the very first implementation of a blockchain. And it's like he was obviously incredibly smart and he solved the Byzantine fault problem, and that was
Yeah.
groundbreaking in crypto. But that doesn't mean that Bitcoin is end game economic kind of
Absolutely
policy.
not.
Not even close.
Absolutely not. I mean, whoever or individual or group of people who were Satoshi, etc., whatever that pseudonym counted for, it was a very interesting white paper. It was a really good thing that they'd come up with. It did solve the Byzantine generals problem, which is something that needed to be solved to have this little breakthrough. The way they did it was fantastic, and I think that Bitcoin, in a sense, is very good at being money. Like
Hmm.
it's really good at one thing, and that's what it's supposed to be. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Um, but I do have, like we just briefed over, there are concerns surrounding it that people ignore sometimes, or people do have some good rebuttals. But it is very much a back and forth conversation to be had that should be had. Um, and there are alternatives, and there are things that can be provided through the Ethereum ecosystem, for example, that Bitcoin cannot do. And I don't think it's fair to shoot either one down, but you should look at them objectively, and that's,
Yes.
I think you're right when you say this kind of idealism comes into play. I think that's a big thing. It happened with Danny. It happened with Do Kwon. It happened with Charles something. His name is
Hodgkinson.
Hodgkinson. I'll fire
Yeah.
more shots off. But as much as those guys are great, there are problems that come along with that.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think it's very helpful. I get worried when I see people start to idolize individuals. Like that,
Yeah.
it's a bearish signal.
Yeah, you need to
It's a
stay
sell
mentally
sign.
flexible in this space. I mean, it's
Oh
still
yeah,
so young, and no
yeah,
winners are here yet. But speaking of adaptable financial policy, I would like to use this as an opportunity once again to pivot over to
yeah,
Frax and Luna,
yeah,
because that
yeah.
was something I wanted to bring up at the beginning. So in the
Mm.
wake of the UST collapse, I was like, hey, this is a great time to bet on Frax because they are like Luna in reverse, right? Whereas Luna tried to walk
Yeah,
up the collateralization ratio of UST by beginning at zero collateralization and then adding the TFL Bitcoin
yeah,
reserves to eventually, their long term goal was to have it fully backed. Obviously, they never reached that point.
ugh,
Frax was the opposite, right? They started off fully collateralized and then
yeah,
had been walking that down to about 80%
yes,
by reducing
yeah,
collateralization in order to increase capital efficiency.
mhm,
Now, again, right after the USD collapse and after the kind of the shockwaves went through the market, I was like, hey, like Frax at a discount right now. I'm going to pick that up because the market will surely realize that they are the kind of inverse. They're it's the same, almost the same policy, almost the same mechanism as Luna, but with a collateralized backing, making
yeah,
it almost the perfect stablecoin. So I was like, hey, let me ape into that and like reap the rewards. Um, of course, I failed to realize that the market would be in full on panic about anything that isn't remotely algorithmic stablecoin, and Frax
yeah,
is, fractional algorithmic. So the market panicked and it has been dropping
yeah.
considerably. But speaking of adaptable monetary policy, uh, I had been following like Sam in the Telegram channel, and the
Sure.
whole community of has been back and forth kind of thinking like what can we do to make sure we don't suffer the same fate as Terra? What can we do
Yeah.
to make sure we gain the kind of conviction of the community?
Right.
And so despite the fact that FX or Frax stayed very has never depegged,
Never depegged.
never depegged. In the wake of UST, they started to decide they started to kind of have the idea of increasing the collateralization ratio to 100%,
Right.
if for no other reason than to be able to say that they are fully collateralized, full stop, and just dispel any fears
Yeah.
about that maybe they would have suffer like a bank run or something like that. And there was some like chatter about like, well, what would that look like in practice? Would that ruin the entire kind of value proposition of FXS? And
Mm.
um, really, though, it sounded like Sam's idea was like, yeah, walk it up to 100%, but then issue like a 20% credit ratio. So, yes, you have 100% backing, but then the protocol could allow itself to utilize like maybe 20% of that backing for more money making operations and such. And then
Yeah.
more communication has been going on since then. And it's just been very interesting to see a kind of a dynamic team full of gigabrains
Mm.
adapting very much to new information, right? To new
Mm.
needs of the community, new kind of worries of the community about like can stablecoins depeg and stuff. Um, and that kind of goes to show you that like something like Bitcoin, which had its monetary policy introduced in 2009 and never changed, and everyone says this is gospel. This is the one way
Mm.
to do it. And then you have
Yeah.
like a system like Frax or many other systems as well. This is just a good example, saying, hey, like we need to adapt every day to meet the kind of the new information, the new requirements, and like to just it's a never ending goal to try to try to succeed and try to find the right balance of all these different levers and pulleys and everything. So yeah, that's been very interesting to watch.
It's a very interesting thing to watch. The beautiful thing about Frax is it's almost, I say almost because it's definitely not, but it's almost impossible to depeg because of the AMO function. Which is the AMOs would just pull everything. You just couldn't produce that sort of reaction.
Right.
There may be a knee jerk, but it's very 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 hard. I think we were trying to work it out the other day to if it could actually happen, but I I don't think it can. But I hope I won't die on those words. It was nice to see that the community kind of have those conversations as to do we need to increase the collateralization ratio, and I think it was because the market sort of decides the collateralization ratio.
Mhm.
It doesn't decide the decentralized ratio because that's depending on what Frax is holding. But they have started to climb that ratio a little bit. Yes, there is a question of the stable coin trilemma to think about. In terms of capital efficiency, as you mentioned, and yes, if you decrease or if you increase the collateralization ratio, you do somewhat decrease how efficient that asset will be. Um, but it's the trade-off, and you can still have a decent efficiency there. It's nothing to say that you don't get up to 90% and think that's enough.
Right.
Um, and even if you did get up to 90%, 95%, that FXS still serves its purpose. Even if you did get up to 100%, there are ways to accrue value, so FXS is still valuable, and you have that fallback should you want to decrease it in a market that is more amenable to something that is more capital efficient. You could do if you wanted to,
Yeah,
um,
it's very
and
flexible policy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like you said, it's the adaptability, it's the flexibility that I think creates that value. I think it's quite important to have that adaptability. If you stand on your hill and you die on your hill, um, that's it. That's the end.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's about moving with the times, like we said before. DeFi moves so quick. You need to adapt with it. Yes, it was a shame that Frax didn't climb in value. People didn't see that. Uh, but everything else tanked, so it's not the end of the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
I bought in, and then I sat there and watched. Unfortunately, I stabled up personally when I should have done, which was good for me, and then aggressively bought the dip because
Right.
I'm an idiot. And even though I knew it was going to go lower, I just had zero self control. So I bought down, and then I stopped myself, and then I bought a little bit lower. Things bounced. I sold again because I actually learnt my lesson this time again. and then I've been buying little bits and pieces back down. But it just jumped again recently. I think 20% by today.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that's because Sam just announced or just published a proposal of a $20 million FXS buyback, which
yeah,
shows quite a lot of conviction in in their own protocol and their own token.
yeah,
It's basically the proposal is like, hey, we think FXX is super undervalued, so we want to buy back our own token,
yeah.
which is impressive. And
F- uh, uh, yeah.
on
So I
top of
was go
that,
on, go on.
one
Yeah.
of the kind of it was almost like upsetting to read, but also like showed a lot of awareness. There's a community member in the Frax Telegram and on very prevalent on Twitter named I think OX Hams HAMZ.
I know
He's a
Hams.
very
Yeah.
smart guy. He's very active. The other
Yes.
day he posted like, "Hey, like nobody is going to use Frax as a stable coin," and I was like, "Well, hey, that's mean." Like but he's right, right? Like people are using UST and people are using USDC and sometimes die. Nobody uses like Rye or Fei or like LUSD or Alchemix LUSD. They have uses, kind of like niche uses, which within kind of like respective protocols and stuff. But I think it was, you know, the idea that all stable coins need to be used as like in the same way that like USDC or USDT is as like an active stable coin that you kind of cash in and you treat as US dollars is um, maybe naive or maybe hopeful because I think that the dominant players there, like USDC, are probably going to stay dominant. And I think there will
Yeah.
be other ones that kind of compete with them on smaller levels. But part of this thread that Hams wrote basically said, like, hey, if we assume that Frax is not going to have massive widespread usage as a traditional stablecoin, like Frax could be more of a bank, right? So let's implement processes and kind of have the protocol design in a way where we can be more close to like a central bank and issue
Yes.
credit and um, not just be a stable coin, but be like the reserve and the bank itself. And I think that kind of thinking, admitting your weaknesses and adapting early to them is pretty positive. And
Yeah.
I'm just very interested to see where Frax is going. It's a small part of what I'm holding and stuff, but it's
Yeah.
hard not to be super interested in teams like Frax and Curve and Tokamak
Yeah.
that obviously have very, very, very smart founders and people behind them. That's also one of the reasons why I still have not given up on like Olympus because Zeus and Co are obviously very smart and yes, if you're looking for like short-term gains, like right now there's no plays at all. But genuinely I'm in it for the tech and I've been here since 2010 in crypto. So like I know it takes a long, long, long time for like
Mm.
your conviction and your thesis to really play out. So if I'm, bullish long term on something like Tokamak and Frax and Olympus and Ethereum, even like for that thesis to play out with the merge and the scaling roadmap and dank sharding, all the layer
Yeah.
twos and the ZK stuff, like everyone's like win merge, like it's gonna take years, right? Like all this stuff to play out for like Tokamak to be like the default liquidity layer of DeFi, for Frax to be like the central bank of crypto, for Olympus to be
Yeah.
also like the reserve currency of crypto, or like Curve to be like the de facto AMM to make sure stable coins are in are keep peg. Like these kind of stuff on larger kind of bases of like not just doing it in this our cute little like DeFi world, but instead in a world where Web3 and DeFi is the internet economy. This is going to take 5, 10 plus years to play out. Like these kinds of
Yeah.
massive changes don't happen overnight. Like don't like buy this stuff right. Well, I think it is a good opportunity to buy right now, but don't like make these plays with like very short term time horizons. Um, because meme coins are better for that. Like have real convictions about the technology and understand what they're trying to achieve in this space and like have like a vision for if web3 does become a sovereign nation of the internet kind of thing where where it has its own independent economy, like what players will you need? What do you have in a real economy? You have the US dollar, backed by like military force and oil as like the reserve currency. You have all these, you know, major
Yeah,
banks and market makers and stuff. You have all these major players. What is the Web3 equivalent of those, right? And you have to kind of see
yeah.
that thesis and like figure out who those players are going to be. Um, but yeah, you have to have a longer time horizon.
You have to have a longer time horizon. Some of those players may not even be here yet,
Most likely they will not. Yeah.
even exist. And yes, it takes long time to play out. You know, there's many ways to play the strategy. Many people do it differently. Kobe does. He kind of makes his bets on momentum and general narrative, and he's very good at it. He'll bet on things like this, and he's very quick to move and change his mind. Very interesting guy, Kobe.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it reminds me of when you're speaking in that kind of context. I think I have my gripes with Olympus. Very interesting, personally. More anger directed at more protocols. I don't hold any longer, but I do still like their protocol. I liked their kind of their new iteration on old concepts. I'm not the biggest fan of rebasement, but that's just a personal opinion, let's call it. Um, but I think these protocols, they do serve purposes, and you've not seen an ecosystem that's been fully developed. I mean, it's not even 10 years old. You know,
Mhm.
Ethereum is barely 10 years old.
Yeah.
Um, and you need to have a think about, okay, these ecosystems, you know, they're in their they're in their baby steps. They've not taken strides yet. Um, I really like that post by Hams, actually. Although a little bit aggressive, and he always has a pessimistic
Yeah.
outlook, which is quite nice.
It is. You always have the
I
devil's
think
advocate.
devil's advocate is a wonderful thing, you know, and I love to play it as well. But I think he does raise a good point, and I think being able to pivot is fantastic, and I think being able to play to those strengths is a very interesting way to provide a niche for yourself. I think Frax does stand to do that. I mean, they are slowly gravitating towards that anyway.
Yes.
I think he did point out some very good things, and I think I would like to see the team's take on it, and they read stuff like that, so
They
so
do.
no doubt there will be some sort of response to it, and I'm quite eager to see that. Um, in terms of uh, in terms of the general ecosystem of you touch on like kind of your strategy wise, Kobe-esque, I would say, you know, some people, if they were looking to buy long term and take their positions, you know, apart from waiting for generational buys, which may or may not come, um, you know, for ETH, etc., your big daddy buys, you want to position yourself to the assets that will accrue value in relation to the asset that you're wanting it to. So
Hmm.
if I were to buy Frax, I like Frax personally, and I would love to hold on to it. But I'm also buying it because I think that it will go up in relation to ETH. So if I wanted to move back out of Thrax, um, this is just a scenario, then I could move it into ETH and profit into that base pair. Um, Thrax is a bad example, but you know that's what I would be looking to do. In terms of having trouble making trades in this market, I'm not a trader, but if someone's listened for, I'm not sure, an hour, the alpha that I'll drop, which I dropped in our cozy little Telegram group, uh, was to look at options, particularly between BTC and ETH. And I won't mention parameters, but that's what I would say is what you should be
Yeah.
looking at, or what
Yeah.
I've heard on the grapevine anyway. I'm terrible at
Yeah.
options.
Yeah. I'm, you know, I'm, this bear market has not been that bad. Like it's been pretty bad, like for a lot of
That's,
alts and stuff. But for like the majors
yeah,
and stuff, it hasn't been that bad. And my
no,
strategy in like
God,
2017 was never cash out anything. Like never go to stables, never just hold altcoins up and down all the way, round trip them down to zero. And that sucked,
yeah,
right? Like that was
ride or
awful.
die.
Yeah, ride or die. And I made tons and I lost it all. And it sucked. And then this cycle, and in previous cycles back like in 2012, 13, 14, 15, all through those, I just never, like, I was a poor college kid that just sold everything as I mined it. So like I never even,
Yeah,
I had no concept of like long term long-term horizons or trading or anything like that. I had not discovered uh, crypto Twitter, a little bit
Yeah.
on Reddit in like 2017 and stuff. But nowadays, like for this cycle, I was like, okay, like I'm gonna do a much better job of like cashing out to some stables, but also to ETH. So any alt plays that ran up really nicely, I cashed out some profits to ETH. And then on the downtrend, I played like the ETH ratio stuff, right? So like on the downtrend, I looked at ETH pairs and said, okay, this one's way oversold compared to ETH, and that's when I kind of like deployed my less of my stables, more of my ETH into those kind of
Yeah.
those kind of pair trades. And
Yeah.
then also completely missed the bottom and bought way too early, and stuff continued to slide down quite a bit more the past couple
Yeah.
months. But what can you do? Hindsight's
It's
2020. It's a lot easier said than done to buy to
it's
sell the
also
top and buy the bottom.
it's crypto. Like if you're trying to time that, I mean, good luck to you.
Yeah,
See you down there.
yeah.
But when people think that it can't go anymore,
Oh, it
you
will.
know, yeah, like suit up because we're going down another
Yeah.
50%, like
But
at least. So,
yeah.
you know,
But one of the big questions that I have, and a sentiment that I've seen on on CT a lot lately, is that nothing is going to bounce back, right? Like that, like all the alt plays, it's going to be just like 2017, and all the stuff that you bought is never going to, it's never going to have another its time in the sun. It's going to be a whole new narrative, a whole new set of protocols next cycle. I don't know if I believe that, and maybe it's naive to think. And I also believed in the super cycle and all that shit. So got it was Suzu's exit liquidity, whatever. But I
Suzu.
do think that compared to 2017, which had basically zero revenue generating protocols, or protocols that even had working apps, or even
Yeah,
anything more than a white paper, or anything like that, they had nothing, right? And when those teams cashed out their ICO profits, all the ETH they generated, they just sailed off into the sunset. They had no incentive to stick around. They hadn't really built a product. The market died temporarily, so they just fucked off and like left and didn't come
yeah,
back. But
yeah,
I think we are seeing, this time it's different, right? Like I think this time we are seeing teams teams that have genuine long-term conviction
yeah,
and are building things that are useful. And I I definitely think a lot is going to get washed out, and a lot
yeah,
of projects are never going to see the light of day again, or never, their tokens are just going to continuously going down. Then stuff like Curve
yeah,
and hopefully Tokamak. Like I mean, I still have all the same conviction I had a year ago.
yeah,
I think that they have genuine use cases, like really really necessary in the space. Like I see like liquidity mining as like the biggest killer of tokens, and you need a solution for
yeah,
that, and Tokenback's the only one I've seen. So I do think that, like, given ACC has success, and given that there is product market fit, and as you get more DAOs on board and stuff, revenue's going to trickle in. Like it'll trickle in, and it'll be slow but steady, but it'll keep going up. And I just think that it's it is different in a way to 2017, in that you have real products now. And I think that
yeah,
it's okay to make long-term convection bets right now while the market's trash, because I do think a lot of these will bounce back, reach all-time highs. I don't know, with unlocks and dilution and stuff. The all-time high for the token price is not going to be the same as the all-time high for like market cap necessarily. But I do think that these teams, a lot of them, will stick around and continue to build out the base layers for
yeah.
Web3.
It's your time frame. Yes, there's going to be unlocks, and that will change the landscape. But it's a question of, are those unlocks, when they come, are those people really going to want to sell out? Is it a revenue generating asset for them? Why the hell would they sell it? It's like killing
Yeah,
a golden goose. They may rebalance a little
rebalance.
bit, yeah, uh, but I think that's healthy, and it has to happen at some point. You can't just trap them. That's the game of VCs, um, and and I think if you're worried about that sort of thing, hunt the tokens, the projects that have been a fair launch, that are not held by massive wallets, that are a little bit more decentralized or spread out, have their full token emissions out or something like that. If you can get all of those and it's a good product, then I would say with a good team behind it, or a community that run it, I think those may be the ones to back. And that is, again, it's a different way of looking at things. It's different from the Kobe kind of strategy. So yeah, I think that it will change the landscape. Those unlocks. I think as for I know people liken it to the 2017 drop, but let's be honest. People say they make kind of these weird calls all the time, and I really don't think it founded on much. Like, none of this stuff was here, so what are you reflecting on?
Yeah.
I really don't see much backing those sort of predictions. But I think that you are right. I think that others are right when they say that a lot of these things will go to zero. It is a very volatile space anyway. You get your perspectives can get really messed up in crypto, and you think that something's safe, but it's like, dude, you're in crypto. Like, this is not
There's
safe.
nothing
This is
safe.
not a
Yeah.
safe game you're playing.
No.
And so people get a little bit fuzzy about that. They're not looking at things in a risk efficient manner. They don't have the underpinning knowledge. They don't know what modern portfolio diversification theory is. They don't know it. And they see these big names saying, I'm all in ETH, I'm all in BTC, and good for them. And also those people have a lot of capital behind them. They already have other assets. Mate, like, these people did not get rich of Bitcoin. These people got rich before Bitcoin. It's like buying the book of the guy who's super rich because he's going to make you rich, and he's telling you all these things. It's like, dude, he's like telling you to buy loads of real estate, and it's like, dude, you made your money off XYZ business, not buying real estate. So why are you selling me this? It can get very cloudy, very, very difficult to see through. So I think having a healthy outlook on risk reward, and on your actual allocations and what you are willing to risk is important. And I do think that doing your research and knowing which ones are the better bets is very, very important. And doing it in a way that you're sure that they're gonna hopefully accrue value towards the base asset that you're looking at is a bit of a safety net, if you're willing to sell them.
Yeah, and I think right now I think we're going to crab along for a while. I do think that the market's going to bounce
I hope so.
considerably come election season. I don't know if everyone has the same idea that, like, the White House is not going to allow every American to vote while at the same time, like, has their 401ks decimated. Like, I feel like there's going to be some sort of injection of money, some loosening up of QT, of something before elections happen to make the markets a little bit happier again. Otherwise, the Democrats are going to get completely obliterated. So I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll see if it does or doesn't. It's going to be very volatile up for a while anyway.
It's a possibility. I think we might crab. I think we may drop further. ETH is not holding. I'm not a big TA guy. I use it sometimes. I don't really trade anymore. But I think that ETH has shown some strength at what, kind of 1700, but I think it's very much capable of going below it.
Definitely.
And yes, I think we may see some more quantitative easing. For sure, the US will lead that, as they normally do, and most people will follow. It may be attached to the elections. I think you have I think you've got a decent point there. I think they may benefit from that. I'm not a big political guy, but I think you probably know more than me. We have seen some quantitative easing technically in the UK through those what do they call them? The checks that they were giving out.
Stimulus.
Basically, stimulus checks in the US and in the UK. You originally saw them for the start of COVID, but now they're actually being used for their intended purpose, which is actually to fight off the increase in living wages. So whether or not we'll see that flow into assets, I don't know. And will that have a bigger effect on the general market? I don't know. I'm not so sure it will, because things are getting more expensive technically, and I know one wants to say it out loud, but if you look at all the parameters, we are already in a recession.
Yeah.
So not a bad one, which makes me nervous personally, because I can see all the triggers from 2008, um, and that makes me worry because that was not a good time.
Yeah.
If anyone remembers that, that was pretty shitty.
Yeah,
Um,
and
yeah,
considering how bad things are right now, I I feel like crypto should be much closer to 0. I think we're holding up pretty well, all things considered.
it is
Everything's down,
not as
a lot of things
painful.
down. Yeah, I mean, like ETH is, it's more than 2x off the highs. It's like 2.5 or 3x off the highs. But I mean,
Dude.
considering the state of the economy and like the fact that like stuff like Netflix and like Shopify, etc., like are down worse than like Bitcoin
Yeah,
and Ethereum is incredible. And
think
like I that's bullish to me, right? Once all this
yeah,
macro finance bullshit gets sorted out, I think it's gonna be like a beach ball held underwater, right? It's gonna pop up either
damn
once
man, I
the
hope so.
Fed eases up or the next cycle. I
Yeah,
just clearly with all like the chatter happening in Washington and around the world about governments, seriously talking about crypto in a way of like
yeah,
it's, they're not saying it out loud, but it feels like a lot of people do believe it's the future of finance. Um, and once these headwinds die down, I think it's gonna be incredibly bullish, as long as there's fair regulations and stuff. And I do
I
think
think
regulations will help the market, as long as they're fair. But yeah,
yeah,
I think there's no turning back now. I think crypto is clearly here to stay.
I think it will be a really good addition to TradFi. I think it will be integrated. I think that crypto is will gain mass adoption whether or not you like it or not. I think that a lot of the DeFi stuff will at some point just be the underlining stuff. You may not
Yeah,
know what's happening underneath, but if you open it up, that's DeFi.
yeah,
It's like you may not see Tokemak around, but if you look at some of the stuff that the companies are using, etc., or the DAOs are using, it might be Tokemak underneath that hood. So, I think necessarily a lot of people won't be looking at that stuff because they don't care. People like me and you will, and will be aiming to take advantage of that because that's what we do. Um, but I think it is coming, and it's going to be very hard to stop. And also, I think regulations um, will be um, stricter. Um, I think that they are a good thing. I think too much of them are ill-fitting regulations, which I think will be probably most of the problem. The teething problems will be ill-fitting,
yeah,
ill-tailored regulations that they try and box things in. They won't work, and also they don't quite understand that with the decentralized solutions that are in place now, that can gain traction, that can't be kind of cancelled or blocked or blacklisted. If you push and push and push and push, the DeFi community for sure will just say a big fuck you. Um,
yeah.
that'll be
They
the
will.
end of it, and you'll push it offshores. There'll be no safe
Yeah,
haven, and you'll push it offshores. And other people who are willing to take them in and utilize it in varying degrees will benefit greatly from that capital. Um, so it's a question of use it or lose that,
yeah. I mean,
and it'll be interesting.
there's obviously it would reduce the amount of capital flowing into it if it was heavily regulated. But like, think
Yes.
of like the Pirate Bay, and that was like two Swedish dudes and literally like a single server that they were like
Yeah. They'd
putting under
move.
their arm, throwing the back of their little, Skoda, driving around
Yeah.
to data centers, in Europe, plugging in the middle of the night and stuff. And yet the governments of the world could not keep the Pirate Bay down. It is still up to this day. And during like the, I guess, mid 2000s when they were really hard after it, like it was offline for maybe 15 minutes at a time, like once a week or something, and then they'd be right back up, at most with a different domain name, and it was impossible to take down. And that was literally just like the front end for like a BitTorrent indexer. Like, let
Yeah.
alone like the real analogy would be like taking down BitTorrent itself, which is of course probably the closest older school analog to like what a decentralized like uh platform protocol is today, where you just have thousands of nodes just operating all like you would have to have the governments go around to individual homes and snatch servers off people's walls and stuff to take it down. Like it's never going to happen. Like it is impossible to shut it down. You can't do it. And then
Won't happen.
yeah, and then with more stuff, I mean, maybe it'll help, maybe it won't, like Starlink or Helium or other like kind of meshy type networks or networks that could have the possibility of, you know,
Yeah.
connecting over long distances without needing to use like the official internet backbone stuff. Like there's no way that it's dying for good because it can't die. It never
It's
will.
very hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard, and you can already make mesh networks
Yeah.
with kind of like mobile phones and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, very hard, if nigh on impossible, to shut down now.
Yeah.
On the other on a related note, if you've not seen it, that pretty much the new consensus is that BTC and ETH can't remember. Can't get over the fact that you're saying ETH and not ETH just yet, but
Oh god.
I will adapt to it. But
No, I have to
but
adapt. I gotta say ETH.
I don't know if people. I don't know what's normal. It's just
I
what
think
I
ETH is
say. It's
normal. I
like
just say it wrong.
people say toke and then toka, and then I like, oh, I don't know.
Toka.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's the accepted version,
Hmm.
christened by Carson. But yeah, I think BTC and ETH are both, I think, being looked at as now. Are
Commodities.
they? Yeah, commodities, not securities. So that's a
Right.
huge win. As for
Yes.
ETH, especially big interest in that for me.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think
huge,
if there's
huge.
I think you still need a moment where there's like a court case to set precedent or actual legislation that
Yeah,
firmly and clearly says ETH is a commodity and not a security. That alone would be a massive catalyst because that's a huge amount of uncertainty there. So a huge amount of uncertainty there, a huge amount of uncertainty over the merge itself. Um, and but those two events are pretty big. And then maybe like a Bitcoin like ETF, like a Bitcoin ETF, like a spot ETF with some regulatory clarity,
oh
a
yeah,
successful merge. That is like a those would be three massive humps to get over. And
yeah.
maybe all three of those will happen by the time the next bull cycle comes, and then that would allow for a ton, billions of dollars of new capital to flow in. Um, but yeah, I think that combined with the fact that like the current financial system is held together with like duct tapes and paper clips and like hundreds of thousands of lines of
Hopes and
COBOL.
dreams.
Yeah, and like
Yeah,
just it's like it's awful like what the current financial systems run on, like the servers and the code and everything. It's ancient and like
yeah.
that needs a forklift and replace with a new underlying infrastructure, and DeFi is a gift
It's ju-
to that
it's
industry.
absolutely. It's just getting it secure, getting it workable, like really workable.
Yeah,
Because the reason why those servers and the way they're using their infrastructure hasn't changed is because it's secure and it works.
yeah,
Um, and obviously secure. There's more to that, transparency, etc. Accountability, things being on and off chain, which I think is good actually. But there's that kind of stuff that needs to be considered as well. I think we'll see a blend, as we all do
yeah,
with most things. Um, that's a point is as well on that decentralized thing, with everything being on chain, Frax being completely on chain, for example. Good things and bad things. So certain things that I've been doing a lot of work into governance recently, um, and there are good things and bad things about being on chain. Again, it's like the maximalist version where everything must be on chain, etc., etc. Not necessarily a good thing. Um, in fact, I think Vitalik has echoed this before. Is I think is that's actually um, it is actually dangerous to have everything on chain.
yeah. How
Um,
do you think that like privacy related upgrades to like say Ethereum, like ZK combined with whatever the privacy related kind of EIPs are for allowing Monero like private transactions by default, like how does that change things? And that's a big question.
yeah, I have no answer for that. I mean,
Yeah,
ZK didn't do so well. Um, ZK Cash, not great. Um, but I think that a modicum of having that utility is quite useful, quite important in some ways. In other ways, it does pose certain road bumps along
Yeah.
the way, as we've seen, as we currently see, and I think that may be a problem. So I don't know how that will work out. I don't know what will win, um, but yeah, I'm not sure how that's gonna pan
Yeah,
out. To be
and
honest with you,
Tim, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, Biko, who's one of the guys who is the kind of point of contact and guy leading the charge for the merge, has he tweeted the other day like that one of the things that he would like to see most in Ethereum is privacy related stuff. But he also believes that there's a very small window when it would be possible, or a very small window where you could get it done before like the regulatory curtain closes. I think was his argument. Um,
yeah.
and if you don't do it like now, it's never. So yeah, and I think that's going to be an interesting play there. I think you could always have EIPs that enable kind of privacy transactions, or you could have like L2s that support it by default. But yeah, it's I think you do need that for some use cases and stuff. And having a lot of things on chain is amazing, and to have that transparency is incredibly cool. But there are definitely use cases that uh, need privacy. So it'll be interesting to see if we get that by default in Ethereum and ever.
I think. Well, I mean, it depends on what project you are and what you're doing. So for example, ETH having it's some on-chain things is brilliant, but a lot of stuff is off-chain, and that allowed for the fork from Ethereum Classic and ETH. If they didn't have that utility, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
Um, Protocols built on Ethereum, for example, can be completely on chain, and some of their stuff should be off chain. So maybe their on chain decisions could be deciding on certain parameters, etc., etc. While off chain stuff um, could be the things that could potentially harm them.
right.
And I think that that's an important distinction to make. But yeah, I think he may be right. There may be a certain time frame, a certain window where that's your time. That's going to be your window for having this secrecy layer or utility built in. I don't know if it should be um, intrinsically linked, as in I don't think it should be the back like part of the backbone of Ethereum. I think it should be an adjunctive mechanism that you could
Mhm.
use, because that way it could be looked at and almost abstracted within Ethereum, because it could cause some problems. But I think it's a very interesting subject. Not my wheelhouse,
Yeah,
um,
yeah. I think
but
I
yeah,
mean, it's interesting to think about how fast things move in crypto, but also how slow they move. It's kind of just a combination of like you have the best engineers in the world like incentivized to compete against each other to build the most efficient, profitable systems. But then you also have this decentralized system. These systems are decentralized by nature, and even the governance of them is. So the decision making is very hard to go. It's like herding ducks. Uh, so yeah, it's gonna be very interesting to
yeah,
see what prevails. And with that in mind, you would kind of think that the more centralized chains or the more centralized applications would be the ones to move quicker and to therefore develop an edge and have the better product and everything. But I'm
yes,
continuously surprised by the ongoing demand for proper decentralization in crypto. Like if something comes along that's better, faster, but it's not as decentralized, the community still rejects it. And even despite the fact that so much of crypto uh, is speculative and people really just want to
yeah,
make money on the casino, the fact that valuing proper decentralization is still like high on the list of priorities is very hopeful to me. Like I like seeing that people still give a shit about proper decentralization. That's why we're doing all this, right? Like it doesn't matter if you create a blockchain that's run by, five guys and five servers. It doesn't that's useless. It's not DeFi. Like you
Mm.
have to be properly decentralized. And so it's good to see that it's still a priority for us.
Yeah, I think the importance of DeFi isn't truly baked in. I think a lot of people are making money off these chains, um, but oftentimes that money flows back to Ethereum.
Yeah.
That tells you something.
Yes.
Where's the real value flowing to and from? I think the other chains are great. I think they provide a lot of things that that Ethereum can't provide. You have all this speed and et cetera, et cetera. But with that does come sacrifices, and I think that's something that's missed. Um, yes, they're very cheap um, to use sometimes, but that is a playoff between uh, security, basically, and
Yeah.
centralization. I do like them, but I'm a bit more in favor of the idealistic decentralization of the ETH, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But they do present value. I like to see, like yourself, I like to see the fact that people do value the decentralization. What annoys me is that you see these networks start off and people say it's great, it's fast, it's cheap, blah blah blah. Why aren't we decentralized yet, etc., etc.? And they zone in on one particular thing.
Yeah.
Um, it is not easy to become a decentralized network. It's
No, it's
incredibly
not.
difficult, and it takes a lot of time. Um, and people can be very demanding. So sometimes I think some of these protocols and layers have fantastic utility and they're good products and they've got good teams. Um, but they are not decentralized yet because they've not been given the chance to get there. Um, but yes,
Yeah, and I think as you ramp
it's a
up in complexity, the difficulty in increasing your decentralization is hard because you have some simple stuff like one of the big ones that I'm quite interested in recently is Llama Pay by the DeFi Llama folk, and it's just like a
yeah,
streaming payment service. There's no token attached or anything like
yeah,
that, but it's an
no,
immutable smart contract that basically does payroll. Right, you deposit your DAO's salary fund into LlamaPay. You decide you enter in a bunch of addresses, how much they should get paid each month, and then it does streaming payments over the course of that month. By the millisecond out to these
yeah,
addresses, and so you can see everything on chain. I guess the people who receive the payments can claim it immediately, but it's a protocol that it does a pretty simple task. It's really well designed and created, but it's an immutable contract that they deployed it once to Ethereum, and it doesn't need to be changed. There's no proxy contracts. There's nothing off
yeah,
chain. It's all very simple, and so that's a DApp that is instantly decentralized. But then
hmm,
you have stuff that's more complex, like Tokamak, for example. Like there is still like off chain type uh, uh, controls happening, decisions
yes,
being made and stuff, because you still have a team that's acting as market makers. You still have decisions like when UST collapsed, the Tokamak team decided to like move funds around in their LP positions and stuff in order to save a bunch of like to save millions of dollars. They end up with a surplus. But had there not been human intervention there, if it was just a immutable smart contract that was deployed, it would have collapsed because this was a massive edge case that maybe would have been needed to have been tested explicitly or modeled out or something, and then had a on-chain way of preventing it or having the guardrails in place. And while you're building something that's this complex, like you do need to be able to modify, and you do need to be able to like update tokenomics and stuff, because you know apart from simple kind of protocols and simple contracts, there's so much learning still to be done and so much things that need to be adapted and changes that need to be tweaked. Like I've never in my life deployed code on the very first time I wrote it, or you know code something up that I thought was perfect and deployed it and have it just work forever, right? No, like
no,
the commit history is like, oh, fix, 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 fix. Oh, really fix this time. Like there's a million different changes
yeah,
you make to like
yeah,
improve and iterate and stuff like that, and that's definitely necessary here. And I guess the counterexample to that, to like Llama Pay, like a great immutable contract. would be like I guess solidly on Phantom, where Andre deployed that, said this is it, right? I ship this and I
Mm.
never have to touch it again because this is an immutable contract that never needs to be touched. And there was a bug in how it like distributed like the rewards for like the first epoch or something like that, and it completely threw off the entire launch of the product. Like all these apps that were going to be like liquidity mining with the VE tokenomic stuff, like it was a disaster, and nothing
Yeah.
could be done to fix it until like the next cycle,
Yeah.
and it was a disastrous launch. And that was a situation where like you very much needed to have the developer to be able to go in and fix the bug.
Yeah.
And it just sucks to see. But yeah, that's the goal you should go for, is to be able to have something completely immutable, the hyperstructure that exists forever, that cannot be changed and always does its job. Maybe Uniswap is a fantastic example of that as well. But
Yeah.
complex stuff, like you do need to iterate, you do need to have that chance to kind of work out the kinks and stuff.
It's a tailored thing for each protocol and its value, what it's supposed to be doing. Um, at certain points, the teams have to give up certain things to become more centralized or
Yeah,
decentralized. Um, but off and on chain decisions are very, very important at different times, and some things you may want to keep off chain forever. Um, and yeah, those are prime examples. I think you bring up some really good examples there. I mean, the the tokamak example is a fantastic version of it. It's acting quick. It's having the off chain decision making there when you need it, um, and and that's paid off massively. People don't really give them credit enough for that, I don't think. But then again, everyone's a little bit quiet during this season.
yeah,
But then you can see the other versions of it. I mean, I really like that Llama Pay. It's fantastic. Working on DeFi, getting paid on time sometimes can go awry. Uh, so, so there is that. Sometimes people send things to the wrong address, and you're sat there a little bit upset. Uh,
Sound bitter.
so there is that. Is it? Yes, just a little bitter. Um, but I think that's a great thing. The immutable contracts are fantastic if you get them right.
Yes, that's a big if.
And that's a big if.
I sorry to interrupt, but like I
Yeah.
remember there's a brilliant article about NASA coding up like the moon lander or the shuttle or something like that. And
Mm,
basically, I'm gonna get these numbers completely wrong, but in summary, it was like there was like 10,000 lines of code, and like 9,000 lines of that were like test cases and comments. It was probably more like 500,000, but like it was like 90%
yeah.
of the lines of code were test cases and comments, and only 10% of it was actual code. And like
Yeah.
that goes into like that goes to show you like how resilient and reliable like systems that shoot a human being to the moon need to be. But to maybe the same degree, like financial systems do have lives on the line, people's finances and stuff.
Oh yeah.
You know, bad decisions can happen if people lose all their money. And you do need to
Yeah.
have those things be resilient and secure and everything. And there is a massive shortage of like auditors in this space, massive shortage of talented developers. So I absolutely believe we're going to get there because the incentives are unmatched. But it will take a
Yeah.
while before our systems are as resilient and foolproof um, as they really should be.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, we do have a severe lack of those things, but yeah, I mean, it's not testing things like that is inviting danger
Yeah,
into those situations. I mean, part of the some of the guys I've worked with, some of the developers, if someone hasn't tested something before they put it on, you kind of get laughed at,
yeah,
because they're like, "What are you doing?" You have it's just it's like best practices. Of course,
yeah,
you're going to test things before you put them on. Why would you not extensively stress test them before you put them on, especially with money at risk? And the bigger the project, the more testing should be done. Um,
yeah.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's the point. I mean, like I say, you might not be shooting someone into the moon with DeFi projects, but
Not
people
yet.
do get people people get hurt, and yeah, not yet.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure if you saw that recent tweet by some anonymous account that was made yesterday or today, talking about the Telegram exploit.
Oh,
Have
yeah.
you
Yeah,
seen
'cause
that?
I posted that in one of our Telegram
Did you
groups.
come clean?
Yeah.
Oh, you did you? Yeah.
I come clean.
Yeah, I don't know
I
if
don't
that's
know if that's real or I don't know if that's real or not.
I don't know. I don't know if that's a
I think
massive phishing
so.
event.
I was like I
It
woke up in
seems
the
like
middle of the
it.
night and read that tweet, and I was, like,
Yeah.
drowsy and stuff, and I'm like, "Whoa." Like, I was like I had to,
Yeah.
like, kinda smack myself a little bit. I was like, "Wait, this is real. This is gonna be, like, really revealing of a lot of crazy
You
shit."
have crazy shit and some of the stuff he was saying were like people like orchestrating murders,
Yeah.
orgies, and I was like, oh, that's fucking crazy. And I was like, well, actually, probably not that crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
again, for me to reference Milady's, do I need to say more? Full
Yeah.
disclosure, I don't own a Milady. Definitely looked at them
Yeah.
back a few weeks ago, and then swiftly changed my mind on that
Yeah.
one.
Well, I
Too
think
hot to
that
touch.
reported drop, is supposed to be, like, on the 15th or and the 30th, I think, so if it's real or not, I guess we'll see this month. I guess maybe it is unusual for him to promise 2 different sets of drops, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah,
If it's completely a scam and just, like or maybe the first one's gonna be a real drop with, like, a very limited amount of data that he was actually able to get, and then the second one will be the virus that steals all your Bored Apes. So
yeah,
we'll see. It's very interesting. There is truly never a dull day on crypto Twitter. I mean,
absolutely
I
not.
was just thinking yesterday, like Razzle Stan and like the what they I don't even remember what they hacked. It was it the BitMEX or whatever hackers like her and her like rap videos, and then like after that, like all the Do Kwon and the UST stuff, and then the Milady stuff, and then this Telegram dump. Like every
Stuff
single day, there's something new.
something is happening, like
It's
popping off
hilarious.
somewhere.
It's
And it's
crazy.
if it's not something crazy big like that, it's someone shooting shots at someone. Like
Yeah,
I don't know, what's his name? Tetranode is always firing shots off at someone,
he's
or
kind
you
of getting
get
on my
like
nerves, to be honest.
yeah, he's charismatic, sort in a
Yeah,
way, and then you get the conflicts with those, and you get people being outed by Zach, who's kind of like just basically putting people on like,
dude, he is
or
the
just lighting
best.
people.
He's
He's
Batman.
amazing. He just like lights people up on fire. And there's a few
I
guys who
fear
do
for
it,
his
but Zach
life.
does a fantastic job. I will protect that man at all costs.
Yes, I will jump
But
in front of the bullets for him.
yeah, absolutely. Because some of the stuff he brings out, you're like, that's good work. I've done some on-chain tracking before. It's not always the easiest thing.
It's not
He
easy
has
at
a very
all.
good way he's got a good way of lining it up and presenting it to people, and really showing some people how there's some absolute sacks of shit flying around.
Yeah, yeah, there
Um,
are.
and like he outed Kamikaze Eve the other day, and
Yeah,
he's like a big influencer, and you're like, man, it's nice to see someone. I mean, you kind of suspect these things, but it's nice to see the evidence presented where you're like, I'm not going to go and like dive into the chain and find all that stuff out.
yeah,
Can't be bothered. But he's doing it, and it does mean a lot. So it's nice to see. And then obviously people jump on board, and you get the Kamikaze Eve slash Tetranode, uh, problem where Tetranode blocked him. Ooh. Uh, but
yeah,
yeah, you get all of that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
it's interesting. Never a dull day. It's
There isn't.
fantastic. It's good
It's
TV. Better than TV.
it's
I don't
it
even own
is.
a
Oh,
TV.
speaking of the
Yeah.
TV, I it does sound like Kobe had hinted out in the past that like some network is like they are producing some sort of crypto Twitter show with like Gainsey and like Size Chad. I don't know if it's like a documentary crew like following them
Don't
around
know.
like Miami or wherever the hell they are. I don't
Makes me
that
cringe.
it does make me cringe a little bit, but it could be
Yeah.
funny. We'll
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
It's like them like, we're down with the kids, and you're like, man, come on. Come on. But yeah, but it's we'll see. I mean, it'd be interesting to see. I should get out to Miami. Sounds fun. But
Yeah, I
some
need
of
to
the
head out for a
guys,
conference. Yeah, at some point we'll need we should all go to a conference where like the Tokamak crews are, or where like Sam from
yeah,
Frax and like all these kind of guys we've been talking about will be, because it'd be really nice to chat with them face to face and kind of
yeah, it
get
would
to
be
know
very
our community
interesting.
a bit better. Yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm hoping to not to disclose my location because I'm actually deep down underneath the ground somewhere. But but I might be moving closer to that area, so that would be good for me to do that. I think it'd be a really nice opportunity to meet everyone and find out who has the neck beards really among all of us, and who's a secret female masquerading as some
Right?
Chad. Uh,
Yeah.
vice versa. I would love to see. Not even angry, mostly impressed at the
Yeah.
people who infiltrate the Telegram groups, but
I
it'll be an
truly do
amazing
I truly do
experience.
wonder if the meme that CT is like 5 people, each with a 500 alt accounts is true. I think I think it's a spectrum, of course, but I do think
We might be
that
two of them.
we might be 2 of them, yeah, right?
We might be two of those guys.
Yeah.
So you never know. We got a lot of spare time on our hands. But yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to go to some of those events. I've never been to them. I've always avoided them like the plague, and tried to keep as private as possible. But as we kind of grow, it's a question of why not. You've got nothing to hide,
Yeah.
unless that Telegram exploit is real. But then other than that, I think it's becoming more mainstream. You can,
It is, yeah.
it depends on how much being anonymous really matters to you. If it's very precious to you, then I'd say absolutely do what you feel is right. But for me, it's becoming less of a thing. I don't click on links. I don't lose my keys.
No.
And so
Knock on
if
wood.
hopefully, knock on wood, might have a bad time tomorrow being jinxed. But yeah, I think as people get more comfortable being in being owning crypto and uh, and being less afraid that it's going to get ripped off them, I think we'll have a much nicer community. I think we'll all go out more to these events and learn more and meet the people, and with that comes a little bit more legitimacy for those projects.
Yeah, I think so
So yeah,
too. Yeah, I mean, we've been saying it for a long time, but I think truly, and again, I've been here for a long time, this was absolutely the first cycle where it did feel like things were going mainstream, and that's kind
oh
of
yeah,
a cringe term to use now, going mainstream and everything, because it's we've said it so many
yeah.
times, but like it does seem like it really does seem like it is.
It's
And it's
it
exciting to see.
it definitely felt different. I mean, it was so much euphoria surrounding that. It wasn't like the last time really. You had so many people involved that just weren't anywhere near this stuff before, and and then obviously it came crashing down. Sure, but this is not Max Payne. This is
No.
not even close to Max Payne. And sure, we've both been in for a little while, um, but I mean, I've been buying bits and pieces all the way up and all the way down as
Yeah.
well. So we all got our losses, but it does not feel that bad yet. It feels bad, but it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like gut check
It
bleeding
could
from
be
the eyes
worse.
bad, Bojack bad.
Yeah.
Like it could
I
be
haven't
bad,
thrown
bad.
up yet.
I've not thrown up yet.
Yeah.
I've had some sweats, but I've not thrown up yet. But again, that's I think the crypto thing as well is it does mess your perspective up where you're like, oh,
Horribly, yes.
70, yeah, you're like 75% drop, whatever. Where
That's all
like
you
in
got.
traditional finance, you'd be chucking yourself off the window like ledge for
You really would
75%.
be.
That's like
Yeah.
that's bad news. So
Yeah.
this is crazy when you're like, nah, yeah, what's that? It's nothing. It's a drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
We're all going to make it. Maybe.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I think the cycle will pick back up before the end of the year. No, knock on
Maybe.
wood. Don't hold me by that, anybody. I do
You're
think the
more bullish
play.
than me.
Yeah, I still I feel that the election play is gonna happen. But I
Yeah.
could definitely be wrong. I'm still holding on to the stables that I have now. I'm still holding on probably for a
I would.
while.
Yeah.
And if I do buy back in, I'm going to keep using like ETH. And if I do sell more,
Hmm.
it would probably be still into ETH, so you can still be exposed to the leading asset when things do pick back up. But
Yeah.
yeah, if nothing else, like as long as we're not entering like a 10-year depression, um, I think things are going to be amazing next cycle, because this cycle it did as many kind of X's there were on returns. It still did not have that blow off top that like 2018 had. And
No.
and that's kind of surprising given there was even more adoption, like the NFT craze, and maybe that contributed to maybe there's just more sectors, so maybe it's spread out over more assets, classes, and sectors. But I
Yeah.
really like it just never felt like there was a real top, and I think maybe because of COVID
No.
and the Ukraine war and stuff, it just kind of petered out before it should have.
Yeah.
But that is also kind of leads me towards that like it's a beach ball being held under the water kind of situation,
Yeah.
and given some macro resolution and some other events that are going to happen related to like the merge and maybe some spot ETFs and stuff. I truly think that we're going to have a hell of a cycle the next time things are bullish again. I think it's going to be pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely more bullish than me, and that's good. I like that kind of that vibe, that energy. I need that in my life. Uh, but uh, but yeah, I think it is far from dead. I think we didn't have that blow off top. I don't know about the super cycle theory or the random walk, theory, uh, or I think it's Willy Woo's drunken wonder type
Hmm.
scenario. I think those are all possibilities. I think even if we do crab or we actually capitulate, um, I think that's okay for the ones who stay around. If you want to stable and buy back in at those levels, or if you want to just hold and keep on DCing, doing whatever strategy you prefer, those are the situations that make or break you. Um, and I will say that people who have done those strategies in the past have done very, very well.
Yes.
Tetranode is one of them. I know people
Hmm.
don't like him that much, but he is one of them. By the way, he's also involved in Frax. Don't He's very much a PvP player. Don't fuck
He
with
did.
Tetranode.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't play nice for people. Um, but uh, but those large players have been around for a while. Kobe the same. Um, they held sometimes. They sold. They had their strategies, but they never left the game.
Yes, and that's
Um,
that's that's a very important thing because my biggest
yeah,
regret of prior cycles is not failing to sell the top and failing to buy the bottom. It's getting kind of depressed in between cycles and then just being like, screw it, sell everything.
yeah.
I want to be out of this 'cause I don't want to have it in the back of my head all the time. Like, oh, every day, how's my portfolio doing? Oh, it's still worthless, whatever. Let me just sell everything just to get it off my mind. No,
Mm,
like I regret that the most. I regret
disillusioned.
not, yeah, being disillusioned, and I regret not continuing to help build, continuing to accumulate during the long bear periods, because that is when the money is made. It's
Exactly that.
accumulating quality assets during these bear periods, and once things do go back up, you'll have a solid foundation, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, if your focus is, yes, you can have your portfolio, your crypto portfolio and things like that, be it your hodl portfolio or your trading portfolio, etc. Um, but if you use this opportunity to learn, to add value, to build if you can build, learn to build if you can't, or network or however you want to operate within the space, um, do it because it's definitely a distraction. If not, it serves as a purpose to learn more and position yourself better. And those are things that people should really be looking to do now. And it's the same in a sense in traditional finance. They say do not leave the market. Don't leave the market, and volatility is your friend. They say.
Yeah.
Yet to agree with that one, but if you followed through on my options alpha earlier, maybe you could. But hey ho, we'll see who takes me up on that bet. But
Mm.
yet
Well,
to
hey, I think
see.
this is a pretty good time to wrap up. Good note to leave on. We've been talking for
Yeah,
almost 2 hours here. I think we
yeah,
kept it pretty on topic, and I don't think I'll have
fairly
to
on
edit too
topic.
much. Yeah, I think
Yeah, yeah,
maybe we can cut this up a little bit, or not. I
yeah,
think yeah, it'll
yeah.
be
We
good.
could we could do like kind of short episodes or longer episodes, however you want to cut it up. But I'll leave that to your expertise. Um, we did kind of keep it within a band, which is good because sometimes we kind of like we go off talking about monetary policy and all sorts. I think we talked about before of all sorts of crazy stuff. We just go off on a tangent, which is actually really interesting for me, but may not look great for or be great for listeners if we start going off on a huge tangent. Um, Maybe the only thing I would add is some sort of disclaimer, as I usually do, with the boring, horrible stuff that people say. Not financial advice, all of that. I had something written down for it, but I've misplaced it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
the standard.
anyone listening right now, if you've stuck with us now for this long, we've talked about a few tokens in this episode. We hold some of these, we don't hold others. But crypto is very volatile. It's very risky. Anything we say, is not an endorsement. Do your own research, and make your own bets and stuff. And you have to have your own conviction. But yeah, on this podcast, we'll probably talk about all sorts of stuff. And I think we won't avoid talking about like price discussions and stuff, because that's a crucial part of crypto. Is that's
Mm,
everything's intrinsically linked to the assets themselves. But yeah, do your own research, and we're not endorsing anything here.
mm, absolutely.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Definitely not an expert myself. You
All
know.
right. Well,
All
Weejin,
right.
thank you so much. Yeah, let's just say goodbye, and then we can keep chatting for a minute after we wrap this up. But
Yeah, it's been a
yeah,
pleasure.
yeah, it's been a pleasure, and
Yeah.
yeah, thanks everyone for listening. And see you next time.
Yeah. Stay safe.